Hi, and welcome to the Escapist Corner. This is the third episode of our series about the four pillars of health and fitness. And I'm excited to have you here. Again, if you like this episode, share it with someone or subscribe. It helps me to keep motivated doing these. Today, we're going to talk about the third pillar, which is sleep and recovery, right? And it's something that everyone does, but not always has as a focus. And we're going to talk more about that in this episode. We're going to talk about some common myths when it comes to your sleep and your recovery. And we're going to look into some studies and what they say about sleep and recovery, and also why we emphasize this as one of the pillars at Escapist. My first question to you is, how many hours did you sleep last night? And what was your average count last week? So if you have one of these like smartwatches, you can just have a look. So I'm going to look right away. And I was lucky. I had 7 hours and 48 minutes. Overall has been, or the average has been 6 hours and 56 minutes the last week. And if you don't have these data, don't worry too much, but usually have some kind of idea of where you are when it comes to your sleep, and to when you go to bed and maybe when you go out of bed. And why I wanted to check this is obviously because sometimes you're just unaware, and especially if you haven't watched it or checked it for a while, you might be shocked at what you see. And some people are have naturally easier to sleep well, and that's great. But some studies show that 40% of Western population is actually sleep deprived, and I think I would belong to that category. I have improved since I've been more thoughtful about my sleep, but we're going to dig into a bit more, and this episode is not particularly about me. Again, if you didn't know so much about your sleep until now, this episode is probably very helpful for you. And also, if you might be just feeling tired, lethargic, or so, I think this episode can also help you. Okay, so like I said, in a study that they've done in 2023, it was a meta study, it showed that 40% of the Western population is having a sleep deprivation, and that they sleep less than 6 hours per night. And we're going to look into why that is a problem. In the US, the CDC says that sleep deprivation is actually a public health epidemic. There's some myths out there that say like, hey, you can just get used to sleeping less. But in a study by Van Dongen in 2003, they tried this. They restricted people for 6 hours of sleep for 14 days. And it showed a cognitive performance decrease at the level of somebody who had been just not sleeping at all for 2 days. The problem was that with these participants, they didn't even recognize that they were declining in cognition. So this is also the danger in this, because you don't see it yourself necessarily, that you're getting basically dumber, slower, and more aggressive, and so on. We're also going to look into how sleep affects your metabolism and your body composition and your mood regulation. So in one study done in 2010 by Nedelcheva, the sleep-deprived participants lost 60% more lean body mass during a weight loss trial. And the group that did 8 hours, they lost way more fat. So if you sleep more, you burn more fat. If you sleep less, you're going to lose more of your lean body mass, meaning the muscles that you want to keep on your body. And in a study done by Matthew Walker, and this was in his book, Why We Sleep, in 2017, it showed that one night of bad sleep had a spike of 30% in insulin. Why that is a problem is that high insulin very often leads to insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is diabetes. So you can basically put yourself into a pre-diabetic mode by sleeping less. And if you are struggling with weight and stuff like that, if insulin is high, the body will always just try to store the fat into your fat cells or into your muscles, but mostly it's going to try to store the energy into your fat. And if you're doing this chronically, and you have genes that allow you to grow your fat cells, you will start to get bigger and fatter. One other thing that a study showed was that if you had a deprivation in your sleep, it also increased your amygdala response by 60%. And amygdala is the part of the brain that is like called the reptile part of the brain that is very reactive and makes us stressed, it makes us anxious, it makes us impulsive. And this is also the thing that triggers us and makes a lot of people feel stressed and anxious overall. So having deprived sleep will make you more anxious. It will make you more stressed, even though there might not be so much stress out there. Depriving yourself on sleep will actually help you to get very nervy and very moody. So let's look into some of these common myths when it comes to sleep. First one is, I'm a night owl. The problem is, when it comes to being a night owl, and I have this experience myself, is that you're tired the entire day, and then at the evening, the energy starts to kick in, and it's mostly because you've been resting all day, and now the body has some energy left. And then you get into that circle because you still need to go up in the morning, and you get into that cycle of being whacked out of the circadian rhythm. And over time, again, you're still going to have the same kind of responses in your body when it comes to insulin and so on. So you definitely don't want to do this. And we're going to go into how you can prevent this in a second. Okay, number two, I can catch up with my sleep on weekends. Well, they did a study on this in 2019, and they show that weekend catch-up sleep doesn't reserve metabolic damage. So even though you might feel like that you felt a relief during the weekend sleeping more, what's happening during the week metabolically is not going to be reversed. So there's no like catching up of what happened during the week in your cells and in your mitochondria. So is it possible? No, not really. Number three, I do fine with 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Maybe you've heard this before. Well, there is a gene that controls this apparently, and it's 0.01% of the population that has this gene and has this possibility. If you're listening to this episode, you're probably not one of them. Alcohol or weed makes me sleep better. Actually, that is not true. In all studies, they've shown that alcohol and weed might put you to sleep because it's sedative, but it actually makes your sleep worse. And over time, overconsumption of these things will still make you sicker over time. So even if you're sleeping, let's say many hours or 8 hours, you're having so much bad quality sleep that you're actually still injuring yourself long term. I mean, I don't know who came up with the idea that you could have some kind of shortcut when it comes to these things, but that's why we're here, because I think there's generally many people out there that think there is some kind of shortcut in getting health without putting in like the sleep and putting in the training and moving. No, maybe I can take a pill. Sorry, this is not the podcast where we're going to talk about the magic pill. Why I think this is important is because when we've been working with people over time when it comes to health and fitness and so on, is you see people stalling in the progression when it comes to weight loss, or they stall in their progression when it comes to their training. And Usually it comes down to the sleep and the recovery. So this is why one of the first questions I ask people when they start with training or they start with something is that, how is your sleep and recovery? What kind of routines do you really have? And sometimes some people have really good routines and they go to bed at certain times and they go up at certain times. But sometimes I'm very shocked also about the routines that I hear, and also the lack of routines. So let's dig into what you can do to improve your sleep and have a better recovery. Because when it comes to training, there are literally just one thing that matters almost more than training is actually how you recover from your training. Because if you are training hard, you're doing all the work, but your recovery is bad, it's like wasted time on the training, because you're just going to injure yourself and then you're going to have these huge setbacks. So let's look into what you can do when it comes to your sleep and to your recovery. So first of all, you want to get 7.5 hours to 8.5 hours of sleep. This is going to depend a bit depending on who you are. And you want to start to wind down, an hour, 2 hours before going to bed. And you should definitely not have some kind of phone in your hand for that time. This is definitely a hard one for me, has been, because that's usually how I've been winding down. But that's not recommended now. These screens have some kind of, they're foils. They also have these like sleep screen, so you're not getting as much blue light. Anyhow, it might make sense to try to not do any screens. Think about reading something, journaling, or just winding down. Stretch, do some yoga. A good thing is just to have a routine that you do. Do something that you really enjoy, that you feel you're getting energy from or getting sleepy from. One thing that I really like to do is to do like mobility in the evening. And that means like foam rolling, or having these like lacrosse balls, tennis balls, and having them like massaging the muscles and so on. And this feeling after a massage, how you feel like, a bit drowsy, and that's the perfect time to fall asleep, because your hormones are actually, you're sending out hormones that will put you to sleep. I also recommend to, when you look into your food and your dinner, you definitely don't want to have a high insulin spike in the late evening. And the reason is that when your insulin goes up, you're still awake, your body's going to fight to get that insulin back down. But what happens with people that are eating a high, let's say, carbohydrate meal, is that they're going to get a high spike. The body's going to dump those carbohydrates into your body, into your fat cells, into your muscles. And what's going to happen is during the night, it's going to be circle back up, and then it's going to try to match the same height. And that's where usually people wake up in 3 a.m. or something like that, because they had this high insulin spike. And when insulin goes up, we feel more awake, because the blood sugar is also usually going up. That's why the insulin is going up. So that's why you want to mitigate that, so you don't set that kind of signal going into your body. So I would recommend eating earlier if you need to do that, and get a lot of carbohydrates, but like later in the evening, or for dinner, better to have something that is not so high and doesn't spike your blood sugar as much. Also important for many is to not have coffee. This is also a bit gene dependent, but some people tolerate more coffee, some people tolerate less. But for most people, it's like after 3 p.m. you don't want to have any coffee. For some people, it's probably way earlier than that. So watch out for coffee. One very good thing is also to go out in the mornings. So if you go out in the morning when the sun is up and coming up, getting sunlight into your eyes is very important to set the circadian rhythm, so you get into that sleep pattern that your body is internally designed to follow. And here's a really good tip, is that if you always wake up feeling tired, instead of setting a wake up alarm, you want to set a bed alarm when to go to bed. And from one book I read, it's called Indistractable. What you can do is that you can have this bedtime, but you can also hack this by turning off the internet. You can at a certain time, so you turn off everything at home basically, so it becomes a high effort for you to try to figure out how to set the internet back on, put the phones working, whatever. But basically you can design this so there's like a definite stop time where you have to wind down and get to bed. So think about setting a bedtime clock instead of a wake up time clock, because this way you can actually wake up really early. And this is, you know, in all cultures, they usually talk about like the one who wakes up early wins the day and stuff like that. There's some kind of saying in almost every culture. And I think if you haven't tried it, you probably want to try it. And yeah, that's my recommendation to you. Sleep is probably one of the most underrated tools that people don't use for their health and for their fitness. And I would say most men are the ones that are worst when it comes to this. So this episode is really to help you, because it's available tonight. You can start tonight. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and you can definitely do this. You need to get rid of the FOMO feelings of like, I'm gonna miss out. Like next Netflix will be there tomorrow. The series will be there tomorrow. The movie's gonna be there tomorrow. The party, whatever, after 9 p.m. it's not gonna be more exciting than before 9 p.m. Like there are so many things that we think we have to do when it comes to FOMO. They're not that important, especially if you're already suffering in some way. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the fourth pillar, which is about social connections and community. And this is also one of these pillars that people might not really get and confuse. So I encourage you to watch the next episode or listen to it. And I appreciate you giving some feedback and also getting to bed early. Hit subscribe, and hopefully this was one part of your winding down listening to this episode. All right. Have a good night's sleep, and bye-bye.